Jon Jones may well be considered by many as the greatest fighter of all time, but that was not enough to convince Dana White to make an exception for one of the boldest and most ambitious events in UFC history. The president of the organization made it very clear that he has no intention of changing his position regarding the return of Bones, especially for the historic card that will be staged at the White House, even after Jones personally reached out to apologize. The relationship between Jones and the UFC has never been simple or smooth. Controversies outside the octagon, doping issues, sudden decisions to step away from the sport, and a pattern of instability have always marked his career. Despite all that, his talent inside the cage has never been questioned. For many fans and analysts, Jones is the most complete fighter to ever step into the octagon. Even so, Dana White has maintained a tough stance. For this historic night in the most famous backyard in the United States, he only wants reliable athletes, and, according to his own words, Jon Jones does not fit that profile. The soap opera started when Jones had given his word that he would face Tom Aspinall this year in a heavyweight title unification bout. However, in June, he shocked the world by announcing his retirement. The decision, as often happens with him, did not last long. Just a few days later, when then-President Donald Trump officially announced that the UFC would stage a special card at the White House, Jones returned to training and showed strong interest in participating. Since then, the former champion has been making statements that point to a new purpose, a renewed drive to compete again. He even went so far as to say he would accept any opponent, which made it clear he was willing to revisit the Aspinall fight. However, Dana White remained unmoved. During an interview with Zach Gelb on SiriusXM, the UFC president revealed that Jones had sent him a message in an apologetic tone, trying to repair the relationship. It wasn't really a conversation. He reached out, sent something like a message saying, "Listen, sorry for how all of this happened," or something along those lines. "I want to fight at the White House. I'm dead serious about it." Gelb then asked whether that gesture had changed White's stance in any way. The response came quickly and bluntly. "No, I appreciate it. I really do appreciate that he reached out and did that. But I need people I can actually rely on for this fight. I know exactly who they are, and I know who they are not." With that, it became crystal clear that, for White, Jon Jones is not seen as reliable enough to take on a commitment of such magnitude. The decision frustrated a portion of the fan base who had been dreaming of seeing the legendary fighter return precisely on such an emblematic occasion. But while Jones's absence may be disappointing, Dana White quickly sought to fire up the public by hinting at another huge name for the card, Conor McGregor. Even after 4 years away from action and having cancelled his last scheduled bout, the Irishman still appears to enjoy the full trust of the UFC president. In an interview with the Wade Concept podcast, White made a point of highlighting the difference between the two stars. "Jon Jones is the greatest of all time. I still know that's a fact. But he's not the greatest of all time in terms of a guy you can trust, that you know 100% will be solid and show up." Say whatever you want about Conor McGregor, because people also like to talk shit about him, but he is that guy. He has always been that guy. I've been in the room and on the phone with him. There are many guys who talk tough publicly, but behind the scenes, it's a totally different game. When the really hits the fan, who is willing to step up and do it? Conor McGregor has always been that guy. White's words show that, despite all of McGregor's problems throughout his career, controversies, arrests, cancellations, there is a personal trust that when placed under extreme pressure, the Irishman delivers. And that trust seems to be enough to guarantee him a spot at what is being called the most audacious event in UFC history. The event itself is already being described as historic. Even before its full official announcement, for the very first time, the Octagon will be set up inside the White House, in a spectacle aiming to unite politics, sports, and entertainment all on the same stage. According to White, the planning is in an advanced stage. So we went to the White House last week, me and my team, and we had the first meeting with him. We presented all the projects, the images, and started showing what he liked and what he didn't. He loved it, so now we're diving in head first. This is when the real work begins. The last time I was at the White House, I went up to the roof, and they had snipers with 50 caliber machine guns positioned all across it. It's crazy. Security is going to be a massive issue, because at the end of the day, The Secret Service's job is to protect the president. And I don't know how that's going to work when you're talking about having people there live, on the White House lawn. But it's going to be for fewer than 5,000 people. I don't remember the name, but there's a park connected to the White House where we can put 85,000 people with big screens. We're going to set up a huge stage and have concerts. We're going to take over Washington, D.C. that entire week. Dana's words reveal the sheer scale of what is being prepared. This will not be just another sporting event. It is being designed as a full-blown spectacle that will dominate the American Capitol for several days. A combination of fighting, music, and politics that is almost impossible to ignore. And if Conor McGregor does indeed confirm his presence, the trend is that he will be positioned as the main attraction, even if he is not competing for a title. Just like at UFC 300, the idea is to put together a card packed with historic fights, with multiple title bouts spread throughout the event. McGregor, with his charisma and global media power, would be the cherry on top. Meanwhile, Jon Jones's future remains uncertain. Even though he still holds his legendary status and is considered by many the greatest of all time, his instability continues to weigh against him. Dana White has been crystal clear. For the UFC to step into the White House, blind trust in the fighters chosen is a must. And at least for now, Jones is not on that list. Jones's career has always been defined by controversies, comebacks, broken promises, and shocking returns. In recent months, however, the storyline has reached new levels of unpredictability. After a long and turbulent negotiation to face Tom Aspinall in a heavyweight unification bout, the legendary Bones stunned everyone by announcing his retirement earlier this year. For many fans, "Sånt där var inte nästifis." This seemed like the final chapter in the career of one of the greatest, if not the greatest, fighters in MMA history. But only days later, the fight world was turned upside down by a huge piece of news. President Donald Trump announced that in 2026, the UFC would stage a historic event at the White House, something never before seen in the sport. That announcement? Promising the biggest card in UFC history at such a symbolic venue quickly made Jones reconsider his stance. Almost immediately after the news broke, the former heavyweight champion reversed his retirement decision, publicly declaring he was ready to fight again. For an athlete who has often said he needed new challenges and fresh motivation, competing in an event destined to make history seems to have reignited his competitive flame. Now, with more details about the special card emerging, Jones insists he is living a new chapter, fully focused on proving to Dana White and to everyone who doubts him that he is truly committed to returning to the octagon. In a recent statement, he made a point of emphasizing his dedication and how much this opportunity means to him. "I feel freaking tremendous. I'm training constantly. The brand is in a great place, doing really cool things, and I'm just happy to be here. I don't know whether I'll be on the White House card. I'm definitely training constantly for the opportunity. My goal is to just show Dana how serious I am about being on the event, and I hope he chooses me, but ultimately it's in his hands. He's the boss." It's a great sign that I'm not only here, but a part of the production and the show. Jones's tone mixes confidence with humility. He admits he cannot be sure he will be part of the card, but he makes it crystal clear that he is training daily and doing everything to prove to Dana White that his words are matched by actions. For many observers, this is a positive sign, since in past situations, he had been accused of lacking commitment or not taking the sport as seriously as he should. The UFC White House card is shaping up to be a landmark in combat sports. Expectations are that the lineup will bring unique fights, legendary names, and matchups that will be etched into MMA history. Naturally, the main event cannot be ordinary. It needs weight, star power, and above all, a narrative that resonates with fans. In that context, one name has resurfaced strongly: Francis Ngannou. The former heavyweight champion, who left the UFC in search of new challenges, has always been tied to Jon Jones in dream fight discussions. Both were considered the two best heavyweights of their era, but they never faced off in the octagon. Now, with a historic event of this magnitude being assembled, the possibility of that long-awaited fight finally happening is back on the table. The one who recently raised that idea was former fighter and current analyst Brendan Schaub. According to him, the perfect setting for such a long-awaited showdown would be none other than the White House card. After all, Jones and Ngannou both carry stories of struggle, resilience, and legacies that almost demand closure inside the cage. Xiao believes this could be the right moment, as it would not only bring Jon Jones back in grand style, but also deliver the most anticipated fight for MMA fans in years. If Jones is determined to prove he is still the greatest in history, and Ngannou wants to show he was wronged when he left the UFC, nothing would make more sense than putting them face to face on this once-in-a-lifetime stage. Meanwhile, Dana White keeps everyone guessing. The UFC president knows that the event already generates worldwide buzz simply because of where it will be held. As always, he seems ready to use that aura of mystery and grandeur to build a card that blends legends, rising stars, and title fights capable of drawing millions of eyes from around the globe. Jon Jones, for his part, seems to have found new purpose in the possibility of this event. He says he is happy, in shape, and mentally prepared for the challenge, making it clear everything depends on White's final decision. For a fighter used to the grandest stages, competing on the White House lawn would indeed be a chapter worthy of his career. And if the fans' wishes and the analysis of experts like Schaub carry weight, then maybe the showdown with Francis Ngannou will finally become a reality, crowning what is already being called the greatest event in UFC history. Throughout Jon Jones's career, there has always been debate over who would be the perfect opponent to truly threaten his supremacy in the octagon. Many rivals were hyped as his toughest test, but none were ever able to dethrone him when he was fully locked in. However, in the view of one former opponent, there is a very specific name within the heavyweight division who could represent a real threat and offer a stylistically nightmarish fight for Jones: Curtis Blaydes. That analysis came from Chael Sonnen, former fighter and now analyst, who faced Jon Jones at the height of his career and knows firsthand the intensity and talent of the ex-champion. Known as the American Gangster, Sonnen never shies away from bold takes. But this time, his assessment carried logic, particularly from a technical standpoint. In a recent video on his YouTube channel, Sonnen explained why he believes Blaydes has long been the toughest stylistic matchup for Jones. He not only highlighted Blaydes' fighting style, but also directly compared their wrestling credentials, a crucial element in both men's careers. Toberuthin's hardest opponent for Jon Jones has not changed. The hardest stylistic matchup for Jon Jones, and this has been true for the better half of a decade, is Curtis Blaydes. You let that sink in and do with that what you want. The highest achievement Jon ever had in wrestling was a junior college national championship. A very good and hard achievement. Curtis Blaydes' biggest achievement is that exact same title one weight class apart. You probably didn't know that. Jon does very well due to his reach. Jon does very well because he's a wrestler, but he also understands the strikes. I'm explaining Curtis Blaydes to you, and Jon is an amazing competitor. When the lights are on, and it's time to shine, he does that better than anyone. And yes, that includes Curtis Blaydes. But I'm just sharing with you, if you're able to make matchups, I wouldn't leave that one out. For Sonnen, the central point is style. Jon Jones has always been a master at using his extraordinary reach to keep opponents at bay, combining his wrestling base with sharp striking skills to become one of the most complete fighters ever. Blaydes, however, brings similar tools, but in an even more physically imposing package. Over the years, Blaydes has built a reputation as one of the toughest grapplers in the heavyweight division, using his wrestling to dominate nearly every opponent. Unlike many wrestlers who transition to MMA and struggle on the feet, Blaydes has shown consistent progress in his striking, turning himself into a versatile and dangerous fighter. That combination, Sonnen argues, could pose serious problems for Jones. It is worth noting that Sonnen is not alone in this view. Many experts have speculated that Jon Jones, as talented as he is, has not yet been tested against a truly elite heavyweight with a strong wrestling base. His heavyweight debut was against Cyril Gane, a refined striker, but someone with little takedown defense, which allowed Jones to score a quick and dominant win. Against Blaydes, the scenario would be completely different. With an opponent capable, at least in theory, of neutralizing Jones's greatest weapon. Even so, Sonnen was careful to stress that when the lights come on and the decisive moment arrives, Jon Jones has a unique ability to rise above and deliver legendary performances. That factor, for him, carries immense weight and is exactly why Jones is still considered by many the greatest of all time. At the same time, however, Sonnen insists that Blaydes must be taken seriously as a puzzle Jones has yet to solve. The idea of a showdown between Jon Jones and Curtis Blaydes has always lingered in fans' minds, but never materialized. Now, with Jones aiming for a historic return, and the heavyweight division in flux, the fight might finally leave the realm of speculation. If it happens, it would not just be another legacy, defense for Bones, but perhaps the ultimate test of his career against someone who mirrors many of his strongest weapons, Jon. Jones is now living perhaps the most enigmatic moment of his entire career. On one hand, he bears the honor of being called by Dana White the greatest of all time. On the other hand, he hears from that same UFC president that he is not trustworthy enough to represent the organization on one of the most ambitious and symbolic stages in its history. A card at the White House. That contradiction alone shocks many fans. How can someone be the GOAT and yet not be trusted to step onto the UFC's most iconic stage? This paradox sums up Jon Jones perfectly. A genius inside the octagon, a martial artist so complete he dominated 2 divisions and, after more than a decade, has still never truly been dethroned when fully motivated. But also a man surrounded by controversies, suspensions, broken promises, and a personal history that forces Dana White to think twice before betting on his name for an event where there is zero margin for error. The UFC simply cannot afford a last-minute cancellation when the stage is the White House lawn under the watchful eyes of the entire world. And while Jones insists he is training, focused and ready for anyone, be it Tom Aspinall, Francis Ngannou, or even Curtis Blaydes as Sonnen suggested, the feeling is that words alone are no longer enough. For Jones, every statement comes off as a desperate attempt to prove he has changed, that he is serious, that things are different this time. But do the fans believe it? Will Dana White believe it? Chael Sonnen, as always, adds another provocative layer to the story. When the American gangster singles out Curtis Blaydes as the toughest stylistic nightmare for Jones, he is not just giving a technical breakdown. He is poking at a wound many prefer to avoid. Has Jon Jones truly been tested against an elite heavyweight, technically and physically? Or was his debut against Cyril Gane, a striker with glaring grappling weaknesses, just an easy walk that further fueled the myth of his invincibility? Sonnen was blunt. The hardest opponent for Jon Jones has not changed. It has always been Curtis Blaydes, and that opens a dangerous door. Because if until now, Jones seemed to be preparing for a triumphant return against high-profile names like Ngannou or Aspinall, the shadow of Blaydes looms as a cruel reminder. Maybe the real challenge of his career is still waiting for him. And this is where the narrative becomes even more captivating. On one side, Dana White rejecting Jones's apology and saying he cannot trust him at the White House. On the other, Conor McGregor, with his own history of scandals, being cast as the trusted man to headline the event. The paradox repeats itself. McGregor, who has also been arrested, cancelled fights, and stirred scandals, is now seen as the reliable figure, the one who never fails when the pressure peaks. What does that say about Jones? What does it say about the way White views each of them? In the end, Jones's absence from the White House card is more than just an administrative decision. It is almost a moral judgment. It is as if Dana is telling the world, yes, he is the greatest fighter of all time, but he is not the man I want on this stage. I cannot risk it. For a competitor with Jon Jones's ego, that must sting more than any defeat, because it is not his strength or skills being doubted, but his word, his honor, his trustworthiness, and if we think about it, that could be the very fuel Jones needs. Never before has his credibility been so openly questioned. If he truly is training every day, truly seeking redemption, there may be no better stage to silence everyone. Dana White, Chael Sonnen, critics, rivals, and even the fans who doubt his seriousness, than this one. Now, imagine the impact. Jon Jones returning at this historic card, facing Francis Ngannou in the fight fans have dreamed of for years, or even taking on Curtis Blaydes to prove that no style can break him. It would be the perfect chance to end the debate once and for all. But at the same time, if White does not budge, Jones could watch this once-in-a-lifetime chance slip away. And then the question becomes, what will his legacy be? The GOAT who retired without facing his toughest test? Or the misunderstood genius who came back against all odds to prove he was still the heavyweight king? Meanwhile, McGregor prepares to shine. Loved or hated, the Irishman knows his presence guarantees headlines, ticket sales, and global attention. And Dana White trusts him. That, for Jones, is another silent provocation. A rival who also made mistakes, also stirred scandals, yet kept the trust of the boss. At the end of the day, this saga is far from over. Jones asks for a chance. White slams the door. Sonnen stirs the pot with blades. Ngannou reappears like a ghost from the past. And McGregor already stands ready to steal the spotlight. It is the perfect mix of drama, controversy, and anticipation. The very fuel that keeps MMA fans hooked. So now I ask you, is Dana White right not to trust Jon Jones, even while calling him the GOAT? Do you believe Jones really is training 5 days a week like he claims? Or is it just another empty speech? And if the fight with Curtis Blaydes finally materializes, do you think Blaydes' style could truly break the reign of the greatest of all time? Or is this just another classic Chael Sonnen provocation? Planting seeds of doubt like only he knows how. Leave your opinion in the comments, because this debate is going to catch fire. After all, we're talking about Jon Jones, Conor McGregor, Francis Ngannou, and even Curtis Blaydes on the same board. And when those names collide, there is no middle ground. Either you watch it closely, or you get left behind.